I was looking at the specs for this machine in the research packet you sent over, and the numbers are honestly just hard to wrap your head around. It beats, what, 100,000 times a day?
Hmm.
3 billion times in a lifetime. It pumps something like 2,000 gallons of fluid through 60,000 miles of piping every single day.
It is, and I'm not exaggerating, the ultimate endurance athlete. There is no other muscle in the body that can claim that kind of resume.
It is. But here's the thing that really stressed me out while reading these sources. It has zero downtime.
Yeah.
It has this, and this is a, quote, unrelenting mechanical duty.
Right.
If my laptop runs for 3 days straight, it overheats and crashes. The heart runs for 80 years. But today, we aren't talking about when it works perfectly. We're talking about the specific moment it starts to fail.
That's right. We're doing a deep dive into the chemistry of a heart attack.
And I want to be clear for you listening, we aren't just talking about clogged arteries. That's the plumber's view, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at this from the perspective of the metabolic researcher.
Yep.
We're looking at what happens inside the cells when the fuel line is cut.
Which is a much more chaotic and, frankly, a more fascinating picture. Usually when people think of heart attacks or angina, they think about the blockage,
Right.
the plaque, the stent, the plumbing.
The clinical cardiologist's view.
That's the one.
Ah,
But the sources we're covering today, from the European Heart Journal to those dense papers on bioenergetics, they paint a picture of a metabolic crisis. It's essentially a civil war inside the cell.
a civil war is a great way to put it. So we've got a mission today. We need to figure out how the heart transforms from this super efficient engine into a producer of toxic waste.
Yeah.
And we're going to solve a mystery that apparently stumped scientists for 50 years, the identity of factor P.
The pain factor.
Right.
It's the chemical trigger that actually tells your brain, hey, I'm dying down here.
It's a fascinating detective story. But okay, before we get to the crime scene, we have to understand the victim. Let's look at the normal state. The papers describe the healthy heart as a metabolic omnivore. That sounds hungry.
It is voracious, but it's not picky. That's the key distinction. Most organs in your body are fussy eaters. The brain, for instance, it pretty much only wants glucose.
Premium unleaded fuel.
Exactly. If you give it anything else, it gets very unhappy.
But the heart will eat anything.
Almost anything. It's incredibly flexible. In a healthy state, it has what we call a positive extraction ratio for almost every fuel source in the blood. It grabs fatty acids, it grabs glucose, it grabs ketones. It's a hybrid engine that can switch fuels on the fly depending on what's available.
But it does have a favorite, right? The data showed a huge preference for fat.
Oh, absolutely. About 60 to 90% of the heart's energy comes from oxidizing fatty acids. Think of fat like diesel fuel.
Okay.
It's dense, it burns slow, and it provides a massive amount of energy per gram. Since the heart is a marathon runner, it loves diesel. It's the most efficient way to get the job done over the long haul.
Okay, so it runs on diesel, but then I saw this stat that completely threw me and I had to reread it. The healthy heart also eats lactate. Wait, lactate, as in lactic acid, the stuff that makes my legs burn after I sprint? I thought that was a waste product.
That is the common misconception. In the rest of the body, specifically in skeletal muscle, lactate is often a sign of fatigue or, anaerobic exertion, but the heart sees it as a free lunch.
A free lunch.
In a healthy state, the heart is actually a net consumer of lactate. It actively pulls it out of your blood, accounting for maybe 20 to 40% of its energy production.
So it's basically a cleaning service. It takes the trash from your legs and burns it as fuel.
Precisely. It's highly efficient. It uses oxidative phosphorylation, which is just the fancy term for burning fuel with oxygen, to churn out massive amounts of ATP. We're talking about 36 to 38 molecules of ATP for every single molecule of glucose. It is a well-oiled, high-yield machine. It takes the waste and turns it into gold.
Okay, so that's the baseline. High efficiency, burning fat and lactate, using oxygen to keep the lights on, but then the blockage happens. Ischemia. The oxygen supply just drops.
And this is where the drama begins.
Yeah. So walk me through the immediate fallout. The metabolic omnivore can't run its normal aerobic system anymore because there's no oxygen. Does the engine just stop?
It tries desperately not to. It initiates what they call a metabolic retreat. That is the technical term. It's a hard, desperate switch from aerobic pathways to anaerobic pathways.
This is the Pasteur effect. Right. I remember that from high school biology, but I never realized it happened in the heart.
It does, and it happens fast. The heart realizes, I can't burn fat anymore because fat needs oxygen. So it rapidly upregulates glycolysis, burning sugar without oxygen. It's trying to keep the pistons firing using the only backup generator it has.
But I'm guessing the efficiency isn't quite the same as that well-oiled machine we just talked about.
It's a disaster, comparatively. Remember I said aerobic metabolism gives you 36 to 38 ATP per glucose?
Right.
Anaerobic glycolysis gives you 2.
2?
2.
That's an efficiency drop of like 95%.
Exactly. So imagine you're driving a semi-truck up a steep hill, carrying a heavy load, and suddenly your fuel efficiency drops by 95%. You are burning through your fuel reserves almost instantly, and you're barely generating enough power to keep the engine idling.
Wow.
It's sustainable for seconds, maybe minutes, but not much longer.
And this causes the flip you mentioned in the notes.
The metabolic flip. This is the first domino. Because the heart is now running anaerobically, it stops consuming lactate from the blood. Instead, it starts producing it. It goes from being a cleaner to a polluter.
So the heart becomes a toxic waste dump.
Internally, yes. Lactate starts piling up inside the cells.
Okay, so we have a starving heart running on fumes, filling up with acid. But this is where the research got really counterintuitive for me. You'd think the heart would just switch completely to sugar and be done with it. Like, okay, fat doesn't work, let's go 100% glucose. But it doesn't. It gets messy.
It gets incredibly messy.
Yeah.
And this is the paradox that really matters for treatment. It's called the Randall cycle, or the glucose fatty acid cycle.
I read this section 3 times. It felt like the heart was fighting against itself. It's like it has muscle memory for burning fat and can't let go.
That's a great way to describe it. Even when oxygen is low and fat burning is technically impossible to complete, the heart's machinery is still primed to start burning fat. It keeps trying to shove fatty acids into the furnace.
Oh, what happens?
Well, it starts the process. It produces these metabolic byproducts, specifically acetyl-CoA and NADH. But because there's no oxygen, those byproducts have nowhere to go. They just sit there. And here's the problem. Those byproducts actively inhibit a specific enzyme complex called pyruvate dehydrogenase.
PDH. And that's the gatekeeper for sugar burning, right?
Exactly. PDH is the door that allows the products of glycolysis, the sugar burning, to enter the mitochondria and actually be used for energy.
Let me make sure I have this straight. The heart is frantically burning sugar to stay alive because it has no oxygen. But the broken remnants of the fat metabolism are essentially locking the door to the engine room.
You nailed it. The fatty acid byproducts lock the door. This is called uncoupling. The glycolysis is uncoupled from glucose oxidation. The heart is trying to burn sugar, but the fat metabolism is saying, none shall pass.
That sounds like a massive design flaw.
In the context of ischemia, it absolutely acts like one.
So what happens to all that half-burned sugar? The pyruvate?
It has nowhere to go. It can't get into the mitochondria. So it gets converted into lactate by an enzyme called LDH. And this is the tragedy of ischemia. The heart works incredibly hard to produce fuel, but because of this traffic jam, it ends up producing acid instead.
Acidosis.
High proton production. And I want to emphasize this is just some chemical footnote. This acidosis has a direct physical effect on the pump. Protons compete with calcium ions for binding sites on the muscle fibers.
And calcium is what makes the muscle squeeze.
Correct. So the more acid you produce, the less the calcium can bind, and the weaker the heart muscle becomes. It's a negative inotropic effect. The heart literally loses its punch because it's drowning in its own exhaust.
That is a terrifying image. The engine is flooding. But this chemical flood brings us to the part of the deep dive that really caught my attention. The pain.
Angina pectoris.
Right. We all know the classic Hollywood heart attack, clutching the chest, the elephant sitting on the rib cage. But why? If the heart is just a pump, how does a chemical shift translate into that specific kind of crushing pain?
This is the hunt for factor P.
The pain factor.
For a long time, scientists were baffled. The acid theory was the leading contender. We knew lactate was building up, and we know acid hurts. I mean, think of lemon juice on a cut.
Sure.
But there was a gaping hole in the theory.
What was the hole?
The math didn't add up. You can have high acid levels from other things like intense exercise or diabetic ketoacidosis, and you don't feel crushing chest pain. You might feel a burn, but not that pain, not the pain of impending doom. So acid alone wasn't the answer.
So they needed an accomplice.
Exactly. And it turns out factor P isn't one thing. It's a handshake between two things, lactic acid and ATP.
Wait, ATP, the energy molecule, the thing we've been saying the heart is desperate to make? I thought that was the good guy.
Inside the cell, it is the hero. But when cells are starving and dying, their membranes break down. They leak ATP into the space outside the cell. And that is where the nerves are.
Okay, so we have nerves sitting on the surface of the heart.
Yes, cardiac nociceptors, pain nerves. These nerves have a specific sensor called ASIC3, the acid-sensing ion channel 3.
I love that names in biology are sometimes literal. It senses acid.
It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
But usually ASIC3 is pretty stubborn. It only opens up when things get drastically acidic, around pH 7.1 or lower. Under normal circumstances, it ignores mild acidity.
So how does the heart get it to fire?
It uses a key. The lactate anion, the actual lactate molecule, specifically sensitizes this channel, sort of makes it loose.
But that's still just the acid part. Where does the leaked ATP come in?
That's the synergy. There's another receptor right next to it called P2X5. It detects that leaked ATP. When ATP binds to P2X5, it changes the shape of the ACC3 channel. It basically unlocks it completely.
So the ATP acts like a master key.
It acts like a megaphone. It makes the ASIC3 channel remarkably sensitive. So now it can fire at very mild pH levels 7.0, even 6.8.
So normally that mild acidity wouldn't hurt at all. But because the cell is dying and leaking ATP, the nerves start screaming.
Exactly. It allows your body to distinguish between I went for a run acidosis and I am having a heart attack acidosis. It's a brilliant, if painful, alarm system.
But there was one other detail in the neuroscience section that really surprised me, the ischemic break. This seemed almost merciful.
Ah, yes. The TRPV1 channel.
This is the channel usually associated with burning heat, right? Like if I eat a ghost pepper.
Correct. And usually acid activates TRPV1 too. It's part of the pain response. But in the heart, lactate actually inhibits TRPV1. It shuts it down.
Wait, why would the body shut down a pain receptor during a heart attack? I thought the point was to warn you.
It is. But there is such a thing as too much warning. We think it's a biological break. If both ASIC3 and TRPV1 were firing at full blast, along with all the other signals, the pain might be so overwhelming it would cause immediate neurogenic shock. You'd pass out.
Or your heart would stop just from the nervous system overload.
Right. So the lactate modulates the sensation. It ensures you feel the pain, angina, but prevents the nervous system from short-circuiting completely.
It keeps you conscious enough to seek help.
Exactly.
That is incredible. So you've got the metabolic flip, the acid buildup, the traffic jam at the mitochondria, and this sophisticated nerve activation. Now, let's pivot to the doctors. How do they actually see this happening in a patient? You can't exactly look inside the cells in real time.
No, but you can sample the exhaust pipe.
The coronary sinus.
Right. The coronary sinus is the main vein that drains about 95% of the blood from the left ventricle, the heavy lifter of the heart. By putting a catheter in there and taking a blood sample, doctors can calculate the lactate extraction ratio, or LER.
And this goes back to our cleaner versus polluter concept from the beginning.
Exactly. If the LER is positive, say 19 to 30%, the heart is healthy. It's extracting lactate. It's cleaning the blood. But if that number goes negative...
It means there is more lactate leaving the heart than entering it.
Correct. The negative extraction ratio. It is the definitive metabolic marker of ischemia.
And the sources say this happens fast. This isn't a lagging indicator.
It's an immediate indicator, within minutes of the blockage. Long before the patient complains of pain, and long before the ECG shows those squiggly line changes, the lactate flips. The metabolism fails first.
I saw a stat about shock and surgery that these lactate levels predict mortality.
They do. It's a grim correlation. In cardiogenic shock or after a major heart surgery, if those lactate levels stay high, specifically above 4 millimoles per liter, the risk of death just skyrockets. It tells the doctors that the engine is still failing, even if the blood pressure looks okay on the monitor.
It also helps differentiate between the types of heart trouble, right? Stable versus unstable angina.
Yes, and this is where it gets like a forensic crime scene. Unstable angina, which is the dangerous kind caused by a ruptured plaque, creates a massive metabolic wake.
A wake?
Like a boat leaving a wake in the water. Using something called NMR metabolomics, researchers found that unstable angina spills specific chemicals into the blood. Creatinine, 3-hydroxybutyrate, aspartate.
So you can distinguish a demand issue from a supply issue just by looking at the trash in the bloodstream.
With almost 100% sensitivity. It's incredibly precise.
Okay, so we know the engine is broken. We know the fuel mix is wrong. We know the exhaust is toxic. Can we hack it? Can we fix the metabolism with drugs?
We can. And this is a relatively new frontier. For a long time, cardiology was all about plumbing opening the artery with a balloon or a stent. Mechanical solutions for mechanical problems.
But now we have metabolic modulators.
Exactly. We are trying to tune the engine while it's running.
This is where we get to trimetazidine, TMG, not the gossip site.
No, definitely not. Trimetazidine is a clever drug. Remember the Randall cycle? How the heart stubbornly tries to burn fat, and that fat metabolism blocks the door for sugar.
The uncoupling problem.
Right. TMZ inhibits an enzyme called 3KT. Now, 3KK is essential for burning fat.
So it forces the heart to stop burning fat?
It effectively sabotages the fat-burning machinery. It puts a lock on the fat furnace. By doing that, it releases the brake on the glucose pathway. It forces the heart to use glucose.
And since we established that glucose is more oxygen efficient?
You get more ATP for every molecule of oxygen you have. You are making the engine run cleaner on the limited fuel it has. It also stops that acidosis buildup because the glucose can actually enter the mitochondria now.
So you're essentially forcing the heart to be a hybrid vehicle when it wants to be a diesel truck.
That's a perfect analogy. You're optimizing the MPG because you're low on gas.
There was one other drug mentioned, ranolazine. I've heard of this one. It's prescribed quite a bit.
Ranolazine is fascinating because it has a dual action. It promotes glucose oxidation like TMZ, but it also solves a mechanical problem. It inhibits the late sodium current.
Unpack that for me, late sodium current.
Okay, domino effect.
Oh.
When the heart is ischemic, it runs out of energy. When it runs out of energy, the pumps that move sodium out of the cell stop working. So sodium builds up inside.
Okay, salt inside the cell.
When sodium builds up, calcium builds up. And when calcium builds up, the heart muscle stays tense. It can't relax.
Ooh, cramps.
Basically, it can't relax to fill with blood. This is called diastolic dysfunction. The engine seizes up.
So ranolazine prevents that sodium overload.
It inhibits the current that lets sodium in, so it helps the heart relax and improves the energy efficiency. It's tackling the mechanical stiffness and the metabolic crisis at the same time.
It's amazing. We aren't just opening pipes. We are literally changing the chemical reality of the cell to buy it time.
That's the big takeaway. You can open an artery with a stent, but if the cells are chemically dead or stunned because of metabolic failure, the patient doesn't get better. These metabolic drugs protect the muscle from the inside out.
It's such a sophisticated view of survival. So let's recap the journey here. We started with the heart as a metabolic omnivore, a machine that eats anything, even waste. But when the oxygen gets cut, it retreats.
It retreats to the Pasteur effect. Inefficient, messy, and acid-producing.
And that acid isn't just a byproduct. It joins forces with leaked ATP to ring the alarm bell factor P via those ASIC3 channels, while simultaneously breaking the heat sensors to keep us conscious.
A perfect storm of signaling.
And clinically, we track this tragedy by watching the lactate levels flip. And finally, we intervene with drugs that force the heart to abandon its fat addiction.
Precisely.
Before we wrap up, I want to hit you with one last thing from the research that really twisted my brain. The lactate shuttle.
I was hoping we'd get to this.
We've spent this whole time talking about lactate as the bad guy, the cause of pain, the sign of death, the polluter. But the new research suggests we might have that backward.
We might. This is the lactate shuttle hypothesis. In states of profound shock, the body might be moving lactate around intentionally.
Intentional pollution.
Intentional fueling. Remember, lactate is energy. Some scientists now think that in a crisis, the body shuttles lactate to the heart, not to poison it, but to feed it. It's a desperate attempt to provide easily accessible fuel when glucose pathways are failing.
So the body is feeding itself its own exhaust.
Ideally, yes, which implies that our current strategy, aggressively trying to clear lactate or view it purely as a toxin, might be wrong in some specific contexts. Future therapies might actually involve feeding the heart lactate to keep it going when everything else fails.
Wow. So the villain might actually be the hero in disguise.
Biology is rarely black and white. It's always about context.
A perfect note to end on. A complex engine, a chemical crisis, and a villain that might be a hero. That does it for this deep dive into the heart's metabolic retreat. Thanks for listening, and keep those engines running.
Stay curious.
See you next time.